Hello, and thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite Size Cybercrime, the podcast where we discuss cybercrimes and cybersecurity news. This week we'll be talking about a crypto heist. This is one of my favorite subjects, because it's just really interesting to see how decentralized finance tends to lend itself to having these major attacks, where hundreds of millions of dollars are stolen in just a couple moments. This week, we were talking about a specific decentralized finance protocol called Drift, which supports the Solana blockchain, which facilitates the trading of many different types of cryptocurrency. First, there's a couple of terms we need to define here, and one of them is a durable nonce. Basically, any Solana blockchain transaction is temporary. If they are not completed within 60 to 90 seconds, they expire and you need to resubmit the entire thing. This is, of course, for security, but it can be unfortunate for some offline transactions, or even some hard-coded transactions that can't always be made within that 60 to 90 seconds. A durable nonce is a way to bypass this for very specific types of transactions that may need a longer amount of time to complete, by allowing them to exist indefinitely. You sign off on this transaction once, and it simply never expires, and can be completed at basically any point in the future. This solves one problem, but creates a major problem, and that is exactly how $270 million of crypto were stolen without compromising any hacks or using any real exploits in the protocol. Attackers were able to get signatures confirming this type of transaction from Drift's 5-member security council. The members of the council likely assumed this was some kind of routine transaction that required a durable nonce, so they signed off on it. This council exists, as I said, for security reasons. At least 2 people from the council, separately, need to sign off on a transaction for it to happen. This is to help mitigate against fraud or suspicious activity. Clearly, it didn't really work in this case. Drift said the signatures were obtained by unauthorized or misrepresented approvals, which were then signed off on. 4 durable nonce accounts were created, which were associated with the 2 members of the Security Council, which signed off on them, and 2 of those other accounts were controlled completely by the attackers performing this attack. This, however, was the setup for a really great trap. On April 1st, April Fool's Day fittingly, Drift was performing a routine test transaction from their insurance fund. About a minute later, the attacker submitted those durable nonce transactions to actually go through. This was enough to create an unintended and, of course, malicious admin transfer, approve it, and execute it in just a minute. The attackers had admin control in their hands over the entire Drift protocol. With this control, they introduced a fraudulent withdrawal method, and, of course, also removed withdrawal limits, which were yet another safeguard against this type of thing, and that is when they drained hundreds of millions of dollars. The Solana blockchain isn't just one type of cryptocurrency, as I mentioned earlier. It's a blockchain which federates the transactions of multiple types of crypto. Most of what was stolen were JPL tokens, followed by Coinbase-wrapped Bitcoin, some stablecoins, and Fartcoin. $4.1 million of Fartcoin were stolen, if you really need to know. Interestingly, the funds were transferred via Backpack to the attackers. Not like a literal backpack, but Backpack is a decentralized crypto exchange that actually does require identity verification. This seems like a really weird move for how well planned out the rest of this attack was, because that gives law enforcement a lead on who could have done this. Unless it's stolen identities or otherwise misleading, it seems really weird to use that particular crypto exchange when there's others that don't require you to verify your identity at all. After all, that is some of the appeal of crypto, is being able to do anonymous transactions. This didn't require expert-level hacking, just an understanding of how the algorithms that run the blockchain work, and how to trick people who sign off on these transactions. Basically, all that happened here is the attackers got these people on the Security Council, administrator level, to unknowingly sign off on a malicious transaction. Kind of like an overworked finance department maybe accidentally fulfilling a false invoice that comes in. That's not actually quite unheard of. There isn't any real exploit in the code or vulnerability that can be fixed besides the human vulnerability. Although that's not to say there aren't some ways Drift can improve its security posture, it's just really difficult to fix without fundamentally changing the entire way the Solana blockchain functions, which you may have guessed is really hard. Drift will need to face a very difficult question, which is how two separate people on the Security Council approve these transactions that they didn't fully understand, and what, if anything, can be done about this to avoid something like this from happening in the future. Will transactions need all 5 people on the council to approve things? Members of the council already rotate quite a bit, and in fact in the middle of this attack, one member did rotate off who'd already signed off. But that was no problem. They still managed to get the new person to sign off on the transaction anyways. Drift did publicly warn people on its Twitter, or X, I guess, account about malicious activity on the blockchain, but didn't really do anything to freeze other transactions for 6 hours. Millions of dollars are traded on the Drift platform every day, so this was likely a big wake-up call to the security administrators and even the users. It's always incredibly difficult when something works exactly as intended, just a little too as intended. Drift is working with law enforcement to see if any of these stolen assets can be recovered. Part of the issue with decentralized finance is it often can't. Many platforms do have some kind of insurance, especially after many years of crypto heists occurring, well, who could have guessed, and some platforms for safety do require identity verification so that you can go after people who steal a bunch of money, but that's also part of the reason I don't really trust these platforms. It ends up with this whole decentralized finance, wanting anonymity, wanting more freedom in the types of transactions you can make without worrying about it, and then it ends up kind of reverting itself back to centralized finance, and you've just kind of reinvented the bank. Thank you to Bleeping Computer and Coindesk. I could not have done this episode without Coindesk specifically, because I had no idea what a durable nonce was, and it seems like it's just a Solana blockchain thing, which is probably why. Their article was really well written and helped me understand exactly what was going on here, even though I'm not super knowledgeable on this particular blockchain. And of course, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, and until next time, stay secure.